morning, Mr. Palmer. How are you? Actually, good afternoon. Good morning for you. Good morning. Good afternoon for me. I can't tell time. It wasn't
Why
a
are you
prerequisite
grinning? Why are you over there grinning like a fool?
because I did it again last week. We recorded, and you thought you did your drum solo and the headbanging and everything for an audience of one. And as I remind you, I always bring it back with about 10 seconds to go on the drum beat, and everybody gets to enjoy it.
It's
Your
all good.
happiness needs to be shared. You know, it's a good thing. We need more positivity in the world. So I'm
Well,
giving
I've been
everybody
fighting
a little.
microtic lately, so hence the hair. But so yeah, so I need a little bit of a good happy music to lighten up my day after microtic.
I was gonna say fighting microtic is a whole nother topic of conversation for another day. And that I wouldn't say pain, but that brings back memories of the winter.
But I've been doing some good things. So
Good things is good.
good things is good. So well, yeah, but again, everybody else is going to have to wait. Sorry, to find out all the goodness that we've been working on. So, anyways,
Yeah, I was gonna say the two of us have been actually busy lately. A lot of travel, a lot more travel than
a
I'm
lot of
used to doing.
travel, a lot of other stuff going on. It's a busy time, but we're taking the time out of our day to join all of our, you know, I think now are we able to say hundreds of
We are.
listeners?
Oh, we definitely are.
Because
Listen,
last
not only
year, I mean,
listeners, but listeners and viewers. So
listeners and
there
viewers,
are
yeah,
people out there who either can't sleep and need visual aids to help them sleep, or really like seeing our faces. And if they are, I really want to meet them because I have questions. I definitely have questions. But no, we have a fan base. However, I think we're still a couple million off from catching Rogan, but now we have fans. It's a good thing.
that's good. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we make time out of our day to talk to our listeners, and what do we have today, John?
Well, we have a podcast recording today, Jim. No, I'm kidding. I think today was a good day for another one of our. Yes, I know. Come on, it's the dad jokes. That's all I got. I got four kids. I got dad jokes coming out the yin yang. Um,
Killing me, dude.
I think today's another good day to get into another in our 10 things about Wi-Fi series, which is crazy when I say that because the series is almost done. We're getting the bottom third of it really. We've got I think
We
tonight we're
are.
on number 7.
Today is number 7. Number 7 of the 10 things that John and I would like you to know about Wi-Fi, um, or at least the 10 things we came up with. Um, so, without further ado, let's see if we can catch up everybody on where we are. We started with the client is always in charge. Then we have more is not always better. What are the requirements? Which it for whatever reason, that seems to have been coming up. I mean, that topic, number 3 right there, more, what are the requirements? That seems to be coming up more and more lately. So I'm kind of glad that we have that one because I've been able to send people back to that link and been like, here, go watch this episode. So that was a good one. It all starts with a good design. Default isn't always best. And then trust but verify. That was our last entry into the 10 things that you need to know about Wi-Fi. And so today, going into number 7, I think the teaser was security. So where I'm going with this is security is great until the client doesn't support it. So I think that's kind of what we've decided on for today is talking about security and how great it is and how we need it. I mean, I don't think there's anybody here that's going to really kind of, argue with us and say, oh, well, I don't need security at all. Nothing in the modern world needs security. I don't think that's going to be the argument. But this is one of those things where the people who know this is a constant struggle. And so when we loop it back to number 3 with what are the requirements, it ends up being a, sort of this topic that we needed to take some time to address.
And
So,
to be fair, it also does tie into number 1, right? I mean, again, the client dictates everything.
yeah,
It comes back to it, and you laugh and you say that it's a popular one. I was lucky enough to be invited down to North Carolina to speak to a client for a couple hours of training, and I admittedly kind of selfishly mentioned the podcast series because look, at the end of the day, we spent time making all of these episodes, and you figure there's 6 already made, 7 by the time people listen to this, so you figure there's about 7 hours of content just on basic Wi-Fi things that not everybody knows or not everybody like has a good understanding of. It's great to be able to lean back to it, and you hit all these basics, and I mean, there's a reason why they're a good foundation for it, and it's come in handy. But the client drives everything, and that's where we're going
That's
today.
true. So you have 1 to 3, and then oddly enough, this actually kind of ties into 4, and
All
then
related.
it is.
We
It is
are
all.
we are giving the Wi-Fi community the CWAP of Wi-Fi fundamentals because everything here ties to everything else, right? Isn't that the way we always talked about it?
Kind of
That's a whole
does.
different rabbit hole. We're not going down that one today. Not enough
But
time.
anyway, yeah, we definitely don't have time. So speaking of not having time, let's get into it. Security is great until the client doesn't support it. And I tell you, um, one of my favorite stories now that I like to tell is um, I got invited to a CWNA, or no, it was a CWNP little meeting of CWNEs to talk about it's the job task analysis meeting, and it was an invite only, and there was maybe 8 of us in the room. And I like telling the story because it's pretty fun. About we were sitting in this room and we were talking about security and the CWSP, rewrite, and it's like, hey, what is still pertinent with CWSP, what is not, type of thing. And I remember sitting next to my previous boss. At this point, she was just a friend, or not even really a friend. It was an acquaintance named Mo Williams. And I'm sitting at this table, and Mo is sitting directly to my right. And on the other side of Mo was a guy by the name of Ryan Adzema. And Ryan had just started a new job, and he was actually in charge of the Wi-Fi at the hotel we happened to be meeting in. And so we're sitting there, and Mo pops open her laptop, as Wi-Fi professionals are prone to do, and she fires up Wi-Fi Explorer, and she's looking at it, and she turns to Ryan, and she goes, "Hey Ryan, did you know you're running WEP?" And now this is in like 2019, right? Beginning of January 2019. So this is literally 5 years ago. And Ryan's like, "What are you talking about?" So she turns her laptop, right? She's like, "Boom, here, you look." And Ryan goes, "Oh, crap." And so he starts firing off all these emails, and we kind of keep an eye on Ryan for a bit. And then he starts slowly banging his head on the table. And we've come to find out later, after Ryan sort of was just able to settle down and talk, and it come to find out that the reason why he was running WEP was because the controller for the room that did all the lights and the curtains and all these other things in the room, the controller was a critical device, but it was connected via Wi-Fi, except it only supported WEP. And so even though in 2019, by this point we had WPA3 because of WEP being broken back in 2002, 2003. Even though this is all taken place in those 16 years from when WEP was broken until that day when we're sitting in there talking about CWSP, and Mo goes, "Hey, you're running WEP." The problem is the client device didn't support it, and so didn't support anything else. And we talk about this a lot, and this is a question that comes up, especially with Wi-Fi 7, about backwards compatibility. And Wi-Fi is very much backwards compatible, right? If you configure it, you can still run an 11B client, 11A client today on a Wi-Fi 7 network that is, at this point, that client's 25 years old, and yet it's backwards compatible, and it will work, and we can make it work. Now, there's many reasons why you wouldn't want that, but in certain applications and certain things, there is no other client device to upgrade to. So when we talk about security, this is the one thing that I really want to impress upon people who are just getting into Wi-Fi or making decisions about Wi-Fi or wondering why you know, their network administrators are so worried about, when we talk about going to like say WPA3 or stuff like that, it's like, you know, because Wi-Fi is backwards compatible all the way to the beginning of Wi-Fi. That's great until it's not, and that really comes to light when we talk about security. So
It's the blessing and the curse of Wi-Fi.
it really is, and it's funny because we always talk about, hey, we want to draw that line in the sand, and we want to put we want to be like, we're not going to be backwards compatible anymore because we want to be able to trim off, the previous 25 years of Wi-Fi and just only focus on the new stuff, because every time we go backwards in a generation on what we support, we end up kind of slowing down our networks. There's if you don't know this, if you enable TKIP, it will rate limit your Wi-Fi to 54 megabits per second because TKIP has that limitation. And so it's like, if you have a device that only supports TKIP, even your latest, greatest Wi-Fi 7 device isn't going to get more than 54 megabits per second. So backwards compatibility, it's great till it's not. And security is generally that one place where it really pops up and makes our life interesting. So when network people talk about this stuff, or when you're talking to your SEs or your partners and they bring this up, there's a reason why, is because we want to be secure, but we also have to balance the rest of this backwards compatibility. And this even, gets into when we start talking about Wi-Fi now. I can't believe we're even having this conversation, but with Wi-Fi 6E, which was 6 gigahertz, versus Wi-Fi 7, we now have this question about backwards compatibility in 6 gigahertz, which is just really kind of funny to me that, we've only had 6 gigahertz for 2 years now, or now we're already talking about backwards compatibility in Wi-Fi and then even 6 gigahertz. And so to me, that's just very weird and odd. I don't know about you, John, but that's just,
I wouldn't expect to have this conversation that fast, but I mean, it's what we do. It's the joke
yeah.
I've been using when I've been just talking about Wi-Fi 7. It's like, it's nice and clean now, but give us a couple of years, we'll mess it up.
Well, and I think I said it at WLPC in February of this year, because Fernay's like, oh, look at 6 gigahertz. It's all nice and clean and pristine. And I was like, well, yeah, that's how it is now. And then I switched to a picture I had taken last year from the labs, and we had Wi-Fi 6, or the 6 gigahertz stuff was just completely jammed from all the testing we were doing for 6 gigahertz. So it's like, yeah, it's nice and clean now, but just wait, and we're going to kind of screw that up. So,
but I have to say this because it's just, I'm dying to, right? But you've got it all cluttered up. But security, right? We're just talking about turning off, hiding the SSID, right? Now, everybody that's watching knows that if Jim could, he would throw something at me. But anyways,
I might throw something at my camera, which probably isn't a great idea.
Please don't do that. The camera's more expensive than the shoe. So, anyways,
this is.
So we have Wi-Fi 6E came to us. We've got 7 now. It's a thing. It's going to be more of a thing moving forward. So what do we have to know about security? I mean, it is great, but not every client supports everything, right?
So but now I'm going to take a little bit more time here.
Sure.
And let's talk about 6 gigahertz, because this is a question that I've gotten a few times in the past 2 weeks, actually, about security and 6 gigahertz. And I think I can boil this down into one common misconception, or maybe a misperception. Let's call it a misperception, because while Wi-Fi 6E was just 6 gigahertz, Wi-Fi 7 isn't. And that's a big differentiator that many people don't grasp, aren't understanding. Because with Wi-Fi 6E and 6 gigahertz, and this is only a 6 gigahertz specific thing, we are locked down to WPA3. It can be enterprise, SAE, or you can use OWE. But there is no open in 6 gigahertz, and there is no WPA2 in 6 gigahertz. but that is not a Wi-Fi 7 thing. That is a 6 gigahertz thing. And so a lot of times, we get this question a lot. It's now, okay, what do I do now? How do I, now that Wi-Fi 7 is here and Wi-Fi 7 is with us, um, what do I do now? Especially, what do I do now when I'm planning for upgrading to Wi-Fi 7, whether it's going to be later this year or even next year? It's like, we need to start having these thoughts or these conversations and planning and figuring out, well, what do I do now with this idea that I want to use 6 gigahertz, but I also need to be backwards compatible, which means that, I still have devices that were, less than 2 years old. You could buy devices that wouldn't do 6 gigahertz. So, what do I do now? Because then you go, well, then I have these other devices that are, and they always end up being mission critical devices. I don't know how we do this, but it's like the devices that we depend on the most, we spend the least amount of money on upgrading and making work, which just,
Well,
I mean, it's just,
once they build a solution and it works and it's proven, they'll improve software, but they're not going to improve the infrastructure, because if it's not broke, why fix it? I mean, there's a reason why, and the other part of it too, I guess, factors into how much time and money does it take to go out and replace some things like the carts on wheels at a hospital or the industrial Wi-Fi in a factory. So it's a pain point, but there's a reason why they do it.
yeah.
But
And I get it.
again, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. And we got somebody we could probably bring on to talk about industrial Wi-Fi, but we're not going to. Maybe not yet.
I'm working on it. But anyway, so this is the question that, and it's like, okay, what do I do now? Well, in the past, when we were trying to do between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, we were trying to do like a band steering, or we'd be like, hey, I need to have a a different SSID so I can keep my devices from going to 2.4, when they should really be on 5 gigahertz. And so we'd come up with a different SSID, and we call it legacy or slow or something like that. And then what would end up happening is you'd always have some user that would be like, oh, well, I'm going to manually pick the slow or the legacy SSID and get stuck on 2.4 gigahertz and never roam, never get to 5 gigahertz because it's a different SSID. And so we're trying to out engineer the user, and turns out that doesn't work out very well. So here's the advice that I have. And this is, and believe it or not, I was able to actually kind of prove this out a few weeks ago in the lab. I think we talked about that on our last episode, but here's the advice. Start with 6 gigahertz, right? Plan for 6 gigahertz, plan for how you need to handle 6 gigahertz. You can pick whether you want to do SAE or if you want to do enterprise, but it still has to be WPA3. You can do OWE if you want. And I put this out there, and I'll put it out there again. If you know of a device that does 6 gigahertz and doesn't support WPA3, let me know. Send us an email, ruckcast@comscope.com, and say, hey, Jim, I know of this device that does 6 gigahertz, but it doesn't do WPA3, because I have yet to find this out. So until somebody does send me an email telling me I'm wrong, start with 6 gigahertz, pick how you want to do it. If you want guess, then yeah, OWE, which has its own issues. It offers encryption, and so you're securing your link, but it doesn't offer any authentication. So you're not, that authentication piece is missing with OWE. So just understand that. But pick how you want to do that. And then what you do is you then duplicate that on 5 gigahertz, because for the most part, you're going to want those client devices to be able to roam from 6 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz. And if you have the same SSID and you have the same security, then it's a seamless roam, whether, no matter what. So then it can roam, because if you get to a point where the signal level is really low on 6 gigahertz, then you can roam to 5. And then as you walk back into an area where 6 gigahertz is improved, it will automatically roam from 5 gigahertz back to 6 gigahertz. And so you have that thing where you're telling people, it's like, hey, even if you can't do 6 gigahertz, but you can do WPA3, you can still connect to WPA3. And if you don't go to 6 gigahertz because you don't have a 6 gigahertz capable device, you're still good, right? You have better security, and you're on 5 gigahertz. Whether, I can't really help the fact that you can't do 6 gigahertz, but that's what we do. We deal with 5. Now, the problem you have is if you say, hey, I have client devices that will do 5 gigahertz, but I don't know if they're going to do WPA2 or WPA3. Now that becomes an issue because transition mode, which most we support, Ruckus supports, and most Wi-Fi vendors do support some version of this, is where you run WPA2 and WPA3 and you let the client pick. You run it on the same SSID and you let the client pick. Now that would be a great solution here until we get back to, this backwards compatibility of Wi-Fi and the clients making the decisions and all these other things we were talking about before, right? Because there are some older devices that, now granted, these are really old devices at this point, that do not understand what that transition mode element means in the beacon frame, and it will break. And so it won't join WPA2 or WPA3. If it's newer, and it would be like, hey, I understand what that means, but I'm not WPA3 capable. I'm just going to join at WPA2. You have devices that are like, oh, I'm WPA3 capable, but I'm not 6 gigahertz capable. A lot of the iPhones, previous to the iPhone 15 are this way, and it's great, except if you have client devices that don't understand that information element in the beacon saying, hey, this is a transition mode SSID. And so if you're confident, then you don't need to have WPA2 at 5 gigahertz. You can still do WPA3. And so that's how you do it, is the transition mode could cause client issues with your clients. So, just do WPA3. And then you end up with, if you do a WPA3 and you find out you still have clients, you put that second SSID on the 5 gigahertz radio. Now I can hear people yelling at me right now, Jim, I don't want to have extra SSIDs on my AP because I already have 3 radios and I have 2 SSIDs per band. And so now I have, 6 SSIDs and I'm trying to keep it below 4. Keep in mind, we're talking about the radio interfaces where we want to keep you below 4 SSIDs. So if you're using enterprise mode, that takes care of a lot of that stuff anyway, because you can do VLAN assignments based on, authentication. And then, so you get 1 SSID. So you have 1 SSID for WPA3, you have 1 SSID for WPA2, and then you're going to have 1 SSID for open or something else. So you're only looking at 3 SSIDs on 5 gigahertz. So that's my advice. Work from the top, start at the top and work your way down, which then brings us to 2.4 gigahertz, which, stays the same, but it gets better because we're able to transition a lot of, by moving client devices from 5 to 6, we can now move client devices from 2.4 to 5, but we still keep those like IoT and some of these other older devices, just keep them on 2.4. You can still have a Wi-Fi 7 AP running a 2.4 network, 2.4 gigahertz network on his 2.4 radio, doing WPA2 and open. You can do that. That's allowed. That's possible because it's not a Wi-Fi 7 thing. It's a 6 gigahertz thing. So start at 6, deal with 5, and then 2.4 becomes that overflow. But because you're able to move some of the load off of 2.4, it's not going to work a little bit better. So if you have clients that you're like, you don't ever get to go to 6, you don't ever get to go to 5, I'm going to leave you on 2.4, then it can still be a Wi-Fi 7 AP with a 2.4 radio acting like an 11N. So there you go.
See, that was simple.
I mean, it's simple when you say it, but then when you start to build it, and you put it in.
Even when you build it, I mean, I'm not trying to simplify anything. Obviously, we've got a short podcast, so it's not, the amount of time and effort to go into this is more than 40 minutes. But I mean, I remember when I turned on WPA3, and I think I either had or didn't have it on, and I just had to do a checkbox in the controller to make transition mode work and get some clients on, because I had some older clients that were confused by it or turned it off. But it's one of those things where it's not anything to be afraid about. I mean, I'm speaking from experience on the Ruckus side of the controller world, but um, I haven't thought about it twice. I haven't had any client issues at home, and I haven't run into anybody in my clients that have had issues. My customers, I should say. Um, it's far less daunting than it seemed it would be when it first was coming down the pike. That's my take on it.
It is, and this goes back to one of the points we had from the number 6 episode. Is, if you know what's going to happen and you know why it's going to happen, then it gives you a little bit more comfort into like turning on transition mode. If hey, there's the possibility I'm going to break some, but if you do it as a scream test, and you go, hey, I'm going to turn this on, it's just so I can see how many of my clients are going to really scream at me if they don't work. Just with that understanding, then it's not as scary to do, knowing that, hey, I'm the one who turned it on. We're going to make one change. We're going to wait for people to yell. If nobody yells, then we just leave it on. And then you can actually, you can do that. But when you're planning for it, start at 6 gigahertz, think about who you want on there, and then just work your way down, because eventually you're going to end up with devices that, aren't going to support any of it. Put them on 2.4. It'll still work as a Wi-Fi 7, but it's 2.4 gigahertz running WPA2, running WEP, running open, running whatever you want. Just as long as you understand that and just sort of work the process. It's not going to be a quick process, but it's a process that you can still follow. Because I mean, look, let's be honest. At the end of the day, right? Any security is better than no security, and I get this all the time. People are like, "Why should I run, WEP if it's going to be broken, or if somebody can crack it?" And people ask me this all the time. They're like, "Oh, if I do this, then or you can come in, and if I publish my SSID, on a sign and I put it on the wall, I talk about this all the time about how that can be cracked." I'm like, yeah, but then it requires me doing things, and so, just like locks to keep honest people honest, putting security on your network, and we joke about it all the time, yeah, I can crack WEP in 4 seconds, whatever, 10 seconds. It's a very short period of time. It's an additional step that I then have to do. And quite honestly, half the time, your traffic isn't important enough to me to go crack it. So I'm not going to do it, because it's just, you're adding that one additional step. Whereas if you don't have security, all I have to do is just sniff it. Yeah. But if you add security, and as you get better and better, it then makes more and more and more steps for an attacker to try to go after. But any security is better than no security, because it's just like a lock that keeps honest people honest. Add the lock in, but work the process with the idea that, security is great, but but understand that there's going to be clients that don't support it. Work down our list. When you get down there, you just go, you know what? Yeah, if I got devices that only support WEP, maybe I look at upgrading them, or I just run WEP, but only put it on 2.4 and just really isolate that thing, and then do some stuff on the back end to lock it down. But at least that gets you through the, taking care of the devices that you really care about, that really will support WPA2 Enterprise or WPA3 Enterprise. Work that process.
That makes sense. I mean, you mentioned the effort to crack it, and it just reminded me of one of your biggest fans who like to say, "Oh, I know I can do this. There's a vulnerability," and what was it? I can't remember which one it was a couple years back, but just because something can be cracked doesn't mean it will be cracked, because it requires some of it. I mean, if you look at it, it was like next level effort, and you have to have a certain computer. And by the way, one thing that, I mean, it's never often said, but it's always kind of overlooked. You have to be within a decent amount of proximity to the network, right? It's wireless. You don't want
Yeah.
to do this from like 300 yards away with it's through a building, through all the walls. Like, you have to be really, really close. So it's going to be kind of obvious, probably. So, yeah, I mean,
And
I know.
there's always exceptions that prove the rule. I get that. If you get a high enough gain Yagi and you are able to get that perfect line of sight shot, even if it's at 300 yards, it can be done. But it also requires somebody planning and thinking about it far enough in advance that they're going to have a Yagi and have the ability, because it's not just a matter of taking your Yagi and slapping it onto a USB Wi-Fi radio,
It's a
because
lot.
then you got to have a USB Wi-Fi radio that has external connectors.
Yeah.
And then you got to, there's a lot of things that go into this. And so,
there's a lot of moving parts, and somebody like that is going to stick out like a sore thumb to your traditional security people. In theory, you would hope. Um, I'm not going to
yeah,
poo-poo security in general. Like you said, any security is better than no security. And I'm a big fan of the paranoia. Honest to God, I am, because it means you care. It shows that you're worried about it, and you should.
yeah,
You don't want somebody to come and be like, "Oh, just wide open." Guest networks wide open, that's fine. Fast, frictionless, get people on and off the network. You don't care because it's not corporate, it's not important, it's not sensitive data. That's fine. Um, I'm a bigger fan of being more paranoid than not, but um, it's walking through the neighborhood, and I lived this unfortunately a couple months ago. If every car on the street is locked except for one, where are they going? They're
yeah.
going for the open car because they don't want to break a window. They don't want to do anything to draw attention. They're going for the easy target. So is web easy? Maybe. Is open easier? Absolutely. So yeah, any barrier is better than nothing at all. So, anyways,
But the last thing I'll put in there is I wrote a blog a few years ago, many years ago, actually, when I was still at my previous job, about security. And one of the things I pointed out to people was, when you run a large guest network and you're running open, it doesn't mean that we don't care about security, because we ran a very large open network. Didn't even have a captive portal. No security, no nothing. And people were like, "Oh, you don't care about security." And it was like, "Oh, au contraire. We care a lot about security, but we care about our security." So we had that thing locked down in multiple methods and multiple ways in order to keep that traffic separate from our network, to make sure you couldn't get back into our network. And so we cared a lot about security, but it was our security. Everybody else, yeah, you're kind of on your own. It's the wild, wild west out there. So again, um, pay attention to it, be cognizant of it, but still, yeah. And that brings us to a teaser for our next episode, number 8. And I'll put it out there. It's depends, or it's not that. I actually have we got somewhere else we're going with it's. So
what you're saying is they're going to have to stay tuned and find out what we're doing next, because I don't even know. I mean, I probably would if I read the calendar or something, but I don't. So I'll find out
I'd
when we
have to,
record it.
and I'd have to remember, because it's like I get it teed up for 2 weeks from now, and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do it's,
That's
and I'm
see,
and then
that's how we keep ourselves entertained and coming back from work, because we don't remember what we're doing next. That's the inside secret about the podcasting business, folks.
yeah, keep it.
Maybe not.
You
I don't
guys
know.
are entertained and and stay pay attention, because we just make it up as we go along. So we have to pay attention too. So we're all in this together.
Oh, on that note,
Yeah.
that's number 7, right? I think it's is 8, so 3
Yep.
more left. Not
Mm-hmm.
too shabby. I don't disagree. I think if we wanted to, it might not be a bad thing to do. That could be a live stream at some point. Do a little bit more of a deep dive into what WPA3 and transition mode look like, and in the Ruckus world, and stuff like that. I think a lot of attention got paid to that when we went to 6E, and I
Yeah.
feel like in all of the changes with 7, it's sort of taken for granted. Almost, it's overlooked. And I say overlooked because there are still quite a few people outside of the wireless nerds. There are still quite a few people who just completely skip 6E, and understandably so. Like, they just said, "I'm going to wait until 7," and so to them, WPA3 is in a whole new world. They haven't had to deal with it yet because it really hasn't been a thing for them.
Well,
So I think,
and if we're being fair and we're being honest, WPA2 does have some limitations and some issues with it. However, it's not like WEP where you could just crack it on the fly. There are some other things that have to happen in order to sort of compromise a WPA2 type of thing. And so WPA3 is needed. And it's a needed evolution just because WPA2 was out for like 14 years. And if you have anything in the wild for 14 years, people are going to find flaws in it. They're going to find holes in it. So we needed WPA3, but it's not like when we went from, WEP to WPA, which was just a stopgap until WPA2 was able to be finalized, because WPA was only around for like 12 or 18 months, right?
Yeah, it was a blink and
So
miss kind of thing almost.
it was, but it actually was a thing for if you were doing it back, in 2003, 2004, that was a thing. And so that's because it wasn't this gaping hole in this gate. It wasn't like the Titanic running into an iceberg type of thing. It was just sort of like, hey, yeah, you need to do it, but it's not as quite required. And if you're following all these other steps and all these other things, then it's not really that bad. And so it's just one of those things where I think it got slow played until 6 gigahertz came along. And now whether you went to 6E or because you're a nerd like us, or you had upgraded to Wi-Fi 6 years ago, and now you're looking to go. So you weren't in the market for a new AP 2 years ago, but now you're looking at it going, hey, I'm now in the market for a network refresh. And now this Wi-Fi 7 thing's out. Let's talk about 6 gigahertz. That's really kind of where those discussions are coming from. But don't be, again, just like any evolution, it's going to be okay. There's resources to help you through this. And so don't freak out about it, but it's like John was saying, it's not as big of a deal as some people might make it out to be. The biggest question is, do you have clients that support WPA3 or not? Once you figure that stuff out, the rest is gravy. So,
yeah. And like Jim said, not to plug the last episode of it, but trust but verify. You should be able to take a look at what your network is running, play with it in the lab, set up a second SSID, not a second, but an extra SSID just to play with it, and do a phased, cautious approach, and you'll be able to move everybody over to where it needs to be, and you'll have minimal disruption. It sounds like it could be a very scary period of time for you, but really and truly, if you do it right, it'll be far more painless than you're anticipating.
Yep.
I remember. I know we're at the end of the show, but I remember it wasn't WPA3 transition, but I remember moving users to a more secure, basically 802.1x network security with certificates and all that, and we got a lot of pushback because it seemed like so scary, so much more work, and so much. And then we did a few small pockets, and suddenly they realized that they got moved, and they really didn't notice a difference. Like, it was very seamless; it was all pushed in the background. And it was a non-event. We literally spent more time talking about it than actually doing it. And once you can prove that it's smooth sailing, everybody's going to adopt. So, good luck.
Yep.
Feel free to come back to the podcast, and we're here to help.
And with that,
I have one more plug because I'm going to be that dork today. And I didn't tell you I was going to do this, so I'm ad-libbing. If you're a listener, and as Jim said before, we do have hundreds of listeners and viewers for one reason or another. But if somebody's out there that works on Ruckus products, that loves the Ruckus infrastructure, and wants to talk to us about it, we don't mind having a guest. RUCKCast@comscope.com is our email. I'm tired of getting asked to buy lists of people who went to trade shows, which is all we seem to get. So if you're actually out there and listening and you want to, if you've got an idea for us to talk about or a topic that you want to come talk to us about, shoot us an email. We're not going to tell you no, at least not right away. We might eventually, but we'll see. But don't be a stranger. We don't bite. And we've had all our shots.
Come join the show.
On that note, I've got nothing else, Mr. Palmer. How about you?
No, I'm good, man.
Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the next episode. Hey there. Thanks for listening. If you liked our show and haven't yet done so, please like and subscribe. If you want to contact the show directly, you can email us at ruckcast@comscope.com. Jim and I both read those emails. To learn more about any Ruckus products or services that we've talked about on this or any other prior podcast, please check out our About section of the show or the show notes. And as always, thank you for listening.